So, hello, and welcome to another episode of A Reader's Paradise. Say, if you like what you hear and you like the stories and interviews that are on this show, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a rating and a review. Your ratings and reviews help others to find the show. Now that that's out of the way, I have to tell you that I'm super excited because this podcast interview marks the first time that I have an international author that I'm speaking with from outside of the borders of the United States. Today, I have with me author Christine Draper, actually children's author Christine Draper from London, from England, I should say. And so I know it is like 7:30 here on Central Standard Time where I am, and I know it's about 2 o'clock in the morning where you are. Am I right, Christine?
That's right.
And I have to say thank you again for being up at such a late hour. And go ahead, give us a little bit about your background and your book.
Thank you for having me on, Earl. It is truly an honour and my pleasure. My name obviously is Christine. I'm actually Australian, but been living in the UK for just over 10 years. I am a teacher and I'm also married with 2 children. I started writing tuition books, but one of my more recent books is called My Friend Josh, and it's about a condition called DCD, or Developmental Coordination Disorder.
Okay, can you say that just a little bit slower? I want to make sure that listeners get that. It's called DCD, and what's the acronym stand for again? Developmental
Coordination Disorder.
Okay. And what exactly does that mean? Developmental coordination disorder. What are the symptoms or signs of that?
Well, to be diagnosed with DCD, a child has to, or an adult, because it goes right through, you don't grow out of it. People have it for life. But to be diagnosed, you have to have a coordination issue, either fine motor, gross motor, or both. However, it tends to affect people in other ways as well, such as planning and processing, and organisational skills as well tend to be affected.
Is this like a neurological thing? Is this like cerebral palsy, or is it in that family, or is it a little different?
It's part of the neurodiverse conditions. So the neurodiverse conditions include autism, dyslexia, ADHD and so on. It tends to be bracketed in those conditions, but it used to be actually bracketed with cerebral palsy and seen as a very, very mild form of that.
Oh, okay. And the reason I ask is because I have an aunt and an uncle who both suffer, from that. And so as you're describing it to me, it brought them to mind of, how people have something like that and they end up, having it for life. So is this something a person is born with, or does it develop suddenly? Are there any triggers that come with it?
So developmental coordination disorder is often also called dyspraxia, and it tends to be a type of dyspraxia. It is noticed in children who are quite young, most commonly diagnosed between probably about 5 to 10. But yes, it is something that they're born with, I guess. Yes.
And it just may not show up until they're into their adolescence. Does it show up at birth, or we don't know?
It doesn't show up at birth, because obviously what happens is they don't meet their milestones, and it takes a while to work out why they're not meeting their milestones. It doesn't affect intelligence. So you get the full range of intelligence with people who have DCD, from people who are incredibly articulate and intelligent all the way through to people who are in special schools. Okay. So there have become a few more well-known people with dyspraxia, such as Daniel Radcliffe from the Harry Potter films, who has spoken about it. There's also somebody who has a blog called The Dyspraxic Doctor, who's actually a medical doctor. So some people are incredibly bright, some people are not, but it does affect processing, does affect being able to do several things at a time, does affect coordination.
Okay, let me ask you this important question. Is this a disease that impacts one particular cultural group over another? Is it more prevalent in one group as opposed to another group, or is it something that can just affect can affect humans no matter where they're from?
It can affect humans wherever they're from, as far as I know. I have not seen any statistics suggesting that it affects certain ethnic groups or certain countries more than others.
Okay, all right. All right. So the reason we're talking about this, which is very, very interesting, is because you wrote a book about this to help young children to understand how, a friend or classmate or playmate who may have this to understand it. And your book is called My Friend Josh. So tell us about the book and why you decided to write it.
Can I read the first page to give people an idea of the book?
Oh, absolutely.
This is my friend Josh. He loves to laugh and act silly, just like me. After we became good friends, I found out that he has a condition called Developmental Coordination Disorder, or DCD for short. It doesn't change how much I like being his friend. It just means that some things that are simple for me, like writing with a pencil, are difficult for him. Some people with DCD struggle more than others. So the book goes through the different issues and difficulties of somebody with DCD and how that is accommodated for in schools and in life. And
so,
I wrote... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I wrote it basically because my son has DCD. Mm-hmm. And I wanted something that I could give to my sister before we went back to Australia on holidays for her to read to her children so they could understand their cousin. So that was the initial reason I wrote it. So for me, it was quite a personal reason. I knew DCD well because I had a son with it, and I'd also read a large number of books on DCD. Mm-hmm. The idea of the book, because as a teacher, I knew that those who had a reason, children were much more compassionate towards. So if somebody was different and they didn't understand why, they're much more likely to be negative than if they had a reason. And there was some thing where they could say, this is why this child's like that. And so I thought it was really important to have a book where the teacher could, for instance, read to the class, and the questions were not about the classmate, it was about Josh. And they could talk about it and ask questions and find out about it without the spotlight being on the child. It's also been used by parents to explain it to a sibling, as well as family members and friends' children and things like that, so that children can actually have an understanding, and that way they tend to be kinder, more compassionate, and generally be a bit more aware of those who are different and know that it's okay to be different and it's okay to be friends with people who are different.
Yeah, you know what? This brings up another interesting thing for me. I just recently narrated a book, a young adult book by a Canadian author, and the book was central. The book had a theme of bullying and how this group of boys was bullying this one boy just because he had red hair, and just little simple things. And so for this makes it, because children sometimes, although they can be compassionate, but sometimes, children as they get older, they could be a bit more unforgiving. And it makes me think that something like this will help, as you said, more children or more people become more compassionate about people who, are brilliant, but also, have their own uniqueness about them. And it sounds like the way you've positioned this is not so much as something that is necessarily a bad thing, but maybe something that is a bit more unique about the person and makes that person, all that more likable or approachable, even though there is this, thing that, that they may be struggling with. Correct?
Correct. I'd like to think so, yes.
Yeah. And I know, for example, I know, like, growing up with, family members that had, more outward disabilities that, were more visual, that you could see You know, I remember as a young boy being around my aunts and uncles, and you know, having, you know, there wasn't a book that explained that, but it was having it explained to me that, you know, they were perfectly fine, but it made them very unique. And it wasn't looked upon as, you know, that they couldn't, in terms of what they couldn't do. It was always looking at like how wonderful they are, you know, not, you know, have a sense of shame or disappointment about it, because of that. Some of our struggles are just more visible than others, because some of us can suffer in silence, and people will never know what we're suffering through. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that. And actually, one of the books that is currently at the editor that I've written is called I'm Not Normal. And it's about a child that goes through and keeps on asking, are you normal? And the person saying, no, I've got this, that, or the other. And not many people have red hair, or not many people have 5 brothers, or not many people. And they just keep on going, oh, but I like your red hair, or but your brothers are fun, and moves on. And so then it says, when they meet up, so am I normal? That they said no. And he says, why not? Well, your friends are too interesting. And he says that's true, and laughs. And then at the end of the book, he talks to his mum, and he ends up with this line, I like being me. So it talks about the fact that we're all unique, we're all different, but that makes us interesting. And that's one of the wonderful things about humanity, is the fact that we do have our unique differences, and that's why we can give so much to each other, and together we can do so much.
You know, it's really wonderful that you said that, because I think we oftentimes forget that, at least here in the States, we're taught that, you know, be different, be unique, but also stay with the herd. Don't stand out. So we sometimes as a society and culture over here send out mixed signals about about uniqueness and being oneself, because the minute you're over here, the minute you become yourself and you march to the beat of a different drummer, sometimes you're socially shunned, because you know you're not looked at as part of the group, or you're not part of the herd, or you're not on the conveyor belt with everyone else. You know, you're that one Mustang in the pack that's galloping, that's deciding to, you know, run in a different direction and not run over the cliff. And so I think it's wonderful that you say that. And it also makes me think about a book that I read by Michelle Obama that was called Becoming, that just came out last year. And what was one of the fascinating things about that particular story, as it relates to what we're talking about here, in the book, she constantly talks about the fear of not being enough, or not being good enough. That, you know, and so outwardly, you know, the world, you know, may look at her as like, wow, you know, this is you are living, you know, an incredible dream. But even with all of that, to still have her saying, am I enough? And I would also imagine that, you know, growing up, you know, as a child, and you know that question may come up from time to time with a person who, you know, has something like this. They may feel like, you know, am I enough? As you say, am I normal? And that sort of things. And how do you tackle that?
One of the very fortunate things for us is my son was actually diagnosed very young, for people with dyspraxia, and he was actually only 2 when he got diagnosed with verbal dyspraxia.
That's so young.
Which is really young, yeah.
So hang on, I want to get to the human part of that, because that had to be a moment, you know, for you as a parent. How did you as a parent, you know, come to terms, you know, with that sort of thing? And the reason I asked, you know, this question is because, for me, when I was growing up, I had also a brother. I had a younger brother who passed away at the age of 6. And so we learned when he was 5 that he was diagnosed with something called mixed connective tissue disease, which was a very, very rare disorder at the time. And so, he succumbed to that. But it was the moment that my parents and I found out, because I'm 6 years older than him, found out that was a very
traumatic,
moment. And so I remember watching my parents, sort of be just stunned that this has happened, because it wasn't something that was in our family, history, medical history, that we knew of. So for the human aspect of it, as a parent, if you have a child that, is diagnosed with this, or you're told this, what are some coping tools that you can, or a bit of insight that you can offer people that will, help?
I think I don't really know why I coped with it quite well. I knew there was an issue because he dribbled constantly. And I was constantly having people saying he must be teething. No, he's not teething. That's just how he is. And he dribbled literally from when he was born to probably about the age of 6 or 7 without stopping, with teething or not teething. And I had people completely argue with me. He must be teething. I've had X number of children, so I know. No, he's not teething. And so I went to the doctor and I said to the doctor that he was constantly dribbling, because I went, this is actually a sign that something's not quite right. And he went, oh, he must be teething. I went, no, it's not that. And he went, oh, okay, I'll refer you on. And I spoke to this lovely doctor who assured me that, yes, at that point it was only the verbal side of it. Yes, he had problems with that muscular motor skills, but he would be fine and he would compensate, and he had a normal intelligence or above normal intelligence, and he passed all these other tests and he would be okay. So I think that really helped, that he didn't just go, here are the problems, but he'll be okay as well. And I think one of the real blessings of this age is social media. One of the curses is social media, but one of the blessings is social media. And you can connect with people who go, actually, I've got an older child with dyspraxia or DCD, and he's a light of my life. He brings so much joy, and he's living a life where he's happy and he's going to do wonderful things with that life. So I think being able to connect with others these days is actually a really useful thing as well.
Yeah, to sort of get support for this, or at least additional empathy or compassion from people. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think you're right there. You're right on spot with that. And I remember back in the 80s when this happened with my brother. Social media wasn't around. There were no support groups. None of those extra support mechanisms weren't around. You felt like you were alone in the wide ocean, and no one could hear you, or you couldn't talk to anyone. So that's a wonderful bit of information to have, that if something like this happens, that you may be able to find other groups and that can support not only you but parents. Let me ask you this question about, I don't want to call it a disease, but I want a condition perhaps. Does this this is, you said this is going to be, for life, and you say, your son was dribbling a lot. Was there anything that they could do to correct that?
No, but he was able to end up self-managing at that, and that's no longer an issue. And it hasn't been for a very long time now. So that hasn't been a long-term problem, fortunately. So. Okay, that's good. So let me ask you this question. So when you decided to sit down and write this children's book, what was your process when you sat down and write? Because I ask these questions for, people. I often run across people who say, oh, I want to write a children's book, but I don't know how to do it, or I don't think I'm good enough, or I don't think I have the talent to do it. Did you have to give yourself permission to write this book? Was this book transformative for you? Was it an emotional journey for you? Or was it something that you just felt compelled to do? And then also, now that it's published, how have other people received the work? What are some of the best things that people have told you about the book? Okay.
I'm sorry. I know that was a lot.
10 questions there. So
Yeah.
I guess to write it, I wanted to write it in a way where it was directed at children and it was the friend narrating it and it was a gentle book. It wasn't a negative book. It wasn't a book which was harsh or woe is me, this is all difficult. But it was a gentle, compassionate tale was what I wanted. So I actually found it reasonably easy to write initially, except for I found it hard to break it down into words that were suitable for the age I was writing for. So I ended up writing it, leaving it for a while, coming back to it, and asking a few people, getting some ideas about how to write it. But then I put it in a Facebook group that was for people with dyspraxia and with children with dyspraxia. And within 2 hours, I had 81 responses.
Really?
Completely blew me away. So I took their responses and I changed the book according to the feedback I got from their Facebook people. So it was no longer about my son. It was about dyspraxia generally. I made sure of that. And I put in everything that the others said that they wanted to be included.
Mm-hmm.
But I also went, oh my, I now need to do this. This is real now because there's all these people saying, we need this, I want this. This would be really good because I want this because. So I then finished writing it. I then sent it to an editor, had it edited for the version for DCD. For the US version, I then actually got somebody to translate, if that's the right word, from UK English to US English. I'm not quite sure what the correct word is there.
I'm sorry we messed up the English language over here.
And sent it to an illustrator to get it illustrated. That was quite a long process in itself, getting it illustrated, and then went from there. So yes, that was basically the process. So it was a bit of a different process in as much as I actually put the full text as I had it onto a Facebook group and said, would you like this book? Do you want this book? How does it need to be changed? And it blew up. So that was amazing. So that was the first question. So the next question was, has it been received? Mm-hmm. Those who have received it have actually received it very well. I've had people go their way to say that they have received it very, very well. I've had a lot more people from the UK. I haven't had a lot of response from the US yet. I don't know if that's because it hasn't been found as much. But those who have received it and I have got response back, it has been very positive, which has been lovely. I guess some of the responses I've liked have been, this just describes my son to a T. And that's been really lovely because it means that another family completely elsewhere has been able to really connect with it and relate with it. So that has been a privilege, really. And the other thing is I've given it to my school because they need to be able to read that. They need to be able to understand this. Or it's really helped my son understand his brother has been another one. So things like that is just lovely.
So will you write another children's book? Is this a genre that you want to stay in? Will you look at perhaps taking on, other things that make, young people or adolescents unique? Is this something that you're called to do?
I've actually got a book called My Friend Jake Has Autism, which is currently with the editor. So yes, there will be others in the series.
There'll be others in the series. That is actually wonderful. And I don't know if, speaking of autism, this is something that has been going around on social media. I don't know if you've come across it or not, but we have something over here. I think it's America's Got Talent or something like that. Okay. There was this young man who came out with his mom who was autistic. And he had a number of issues, but the main thing is that he was, autistic.
Was he blind?
Yes, he was blind.
Yeah, I saw that.
You saw that? That sent chills through me, where he talked about, I've been through so many places in my space and time. I've sang a lot of songs, and he sang an old
Mm.
Donny Hathaway song. I watched that video, and I just loved his energy, and how he was so beautiful in
Mm.
what he was able to do, and how he just, through his voice, was able just to touch the soul in such a way that you could not help but, well, for me, I could not help but get goosebumps and even tear up a little bit, because it was just the miracle of that, the miracle of him. Just, I mean, there
Mm.
was a brightness in him that just came through. And it was one of those moments where, or whatever, society may have judged about appearance or behavior or whatever, was just completely thrown away when you heard this young man's soulful voice come through. And so I just bring that up as a side note, because you brought up autism in your book, and I think it's important for people to know about these different things, and not only to help you understand, but if you are a person who is of childbearing age, and you're having a child, one of the things that you always want to do is have a healthy child.
Mm.
But also be aware that the miracle, you never know what you're going to get, and you have to be able to love the beauty of the soul that is given to you to take care of, regardless of what happens. And that's something that I learned through my grandmother, who had two children with cerebral palsy in the 40s, and then again in the early 1960s, and was a single mom, and just never made anybody feel different, or as if they were less than. And I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know I had friends who had children just a year older than my son. And one of those children has severe cerebral palsy and isn't able to sit up on her own, isn't able to eat, and so on. And I can remember thinking when I was pregnant, if I had my child ended up like that, with that degree of disability, would I be able to cope? Would I still love them? And I thought, yes, I'll be able to cope. Yes, I still love them. Yes, I still want them just as much. And so that was quite nice, because even before I had my son, I knew that it didn't matter what challenges there were or what difficulties they would face, I could cope with that. So that was quite a nice kind of gentle introduction that wasn't actually me. So I think that kind of helped a little bit too.
Yeah. I think so too. And that is wonderful. And by the way, let me ask this one last question. What is your son's name?
My son's name's Luke.
Luke? And how old is Luke now?
He's 15.
Oh my God, you have a man.
He is. He really is. He's taller than me now. He's about 6'3" now, so I'm the shorty now. His sister and I are the shorties. But no, he's great. And one of the questions you said earlier was about self-esteem. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that he's always known, and I've been open with him about the fact that he has DCD, has really helped him. Because it isn't, I'm stupid, I'm clumsy, I can't do this. It's, I can't do this because. And again, that reason has really helped him. So all the way through, he's had that self-esteem. No, his coordination's not great, but he's great at reading. He loves books. He loves writing. He wants to become an author himself. Mm-hmm. So it has really helped his self-esteem to have that diagnosis and to know this is why. So that's been really useful for him.
Wow, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. So if you ever listen to this, hello from the U.S. I'm Earl. Nice to hear about you. Christine, I know it's late, and I want you to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find your book, and where they can follow you on social media, so that if they want to get the book, or if maybe they want to share their journey with this sort of thing with you, they can do so.
Okay, well, my book's available from Amazon and other bookshops. And I'm mostly on Facebook at CR Draper, or in the group called Achieve Today.
Okay. And once again, and now is your book is also Amazon? Do they have to go through Amazon UK for the book, or can they go through Amazon.com?
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com. Okay, because I know there's a UK Amazon, and like a Canada Amazon, so I want to make sure we were clear on that. Well, Christine, thank you for stopping by to share your story, to share your book.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolutely wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and get some rest. I'm so sorry I'm keeping you up late, but thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
Hi, this is Earl Sewell, host of the podcast A Reader's Paradise. I'm here to let you know about a new audio drama that I have created called Lenny Gray. It is a bi-weekly show that you can find out on Apple Podcasts, on Spreaker.com, on Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. So, what I'm doing here right now is giving you a preview of the show. Season 1 is up and running, and I hope that you will go over, check it out, leave a rating, and a review. Until then, I hope you enjoy this preview of the audio drama Lenny Gray. Katie Books Productions presents Lenny Gray, an audio drama, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell. Previously on Lenny Gray.
I got to have you, Lenny. I ain't gonna let no other man get a hold of you. I aim to be the only man in your life for the rest of your days. I mean that. So either you marry me tonight, or you don't marry in your lifetime. I'll make sure of it.
There was an ultimatum in Curly's voice and an uncompromising fire in his eyes. He would beat her into her grave if she didn't do what he wanted. And Ida, his mean-spirited mother, would stand by and allow him to do it. Both of them had caverns of blackness so deep in their souls that even the light of God couldn't reach the bottom of them. He'd hit her before for trying to break up with her. He punched her so hard that she had a headache for 2 days. She couldn't go to the sheriff. He was another member of the white side of Curly's family. Besides, Sheriff Quinney cared as much about a colored man beating his woman as he did about shooting, hanging, or placing a colored person in jail. It just didn't matter to him, one way or the other. Lenny Gray wanted to move, but felt as if something had forced her body to become paralyzed. Curly took a slightly gentler approach. He pulled her close to him, attempting to ease her fear. He pressed her cheek against his chest and combed his fingers through her hair. Lenny Gray felt tears stinging the back of her eyes when she inhaled the strong scent of moonshine that was seeping through his skin.
You belong to me. I wanted you the moment you started to blossom. I said to myself, Curly, that Lenny Gray is going to be your wife. You got them pretty gray eyes, long black hair. You the prize of Sweetwater. Well, my prize anyway. That's why I kept coming around your daddy. I wasn't coming around so much for him as I was doing it to try to get close to you. I wanted you to like me. Don't you remember how I was always bringing you stuff you needed? If you needed new shoes that your daddy couldn't afford to get right away, I helped him out. In fact, I'm the one who got you them shoes you got on your goddamn feet now. Most folks around this town ain't never gonna know what it feel like to have shoes on their feet. Is the preacher still in the wagon, boy?
Lenny Gray looked into Ida's face, which had an impatient expression.
Yeah, he's still there,
Curly answered.
I'm gonna go get him so y'all can be married and we can get back before the rain starts,
said Ida as she stepped off the train tracks and walked towards the road. Curly stepped back and placed Lenny Gray's face between the palms of his calloused hands. He looked so deeply into her eyes that she felt her soul wince.
I know you love me. You may not say it or know how to show your feelings for me, but I know and understand that you do. I'm the best man you could ever hope for, and the sooner you let that settle into your head, the better. Don't make no sense for you try to run away from a good man like me. Shh. Don't talk. Just let me hold your shivering body close. You carry my family inside of you. There ain't no way in the world I'm gonna allow a pretty girl like you to run away from me to be mistreated by some fool. I'm gonna take care of you. You won't have to worry about nothing except taking care of the shanty I'm gonna build and the babies we gonna put on this earth. Lenny, we gonna make a lot of pretty babies together.
Lenny Gray felt as if she had just fallen out of the trouble tree and hit every branch on the way down. She was standing on unsteady legs. She didn't want to be married, and she didn't want a life in a leaky shanty filled with babies. That much she knew. That way of life was all too common in this town. In an act of desperation, she pushed Curly away from her and began running again.
Lenny, come back here!